Hello and welcome to Firstpost Africa, where we get you the top stories from the continent and from across the world. I'm Joshua Barnes, coming to you live from the Firstpost studios. First, let's take a look at the headlines. Hamas says that the Gaza ceasefire cannot proceed to its second phase as long as Israeli violations persist, calling on mediators to pressure Israel to respect the deal. US President Donald Trump warns that a potential Supreme Court ruling against his power to apply tariffs would threaten national security. Fighting between Thailand and Cambodia spreads to new parts of their contested border as the death toll rises to 10. More than 140,000 civilians have fled the violence, which reignited on Sunday. The International Criminal Court hands down a 20-year sentence to Sudanese militia leader Ali Kashaib for war crimes and crimes against humanity committed during the country's civil war 2 decades ago. And Nepal's election commission approves 114 political parties, with several of them being new to contest the first polls since a mass uprising ousted the government in September. Hello and welcome. We begin with the latest updates on the DR Congo conflict. A ceasefire brokered by US President Donald Trump seems to be falling apart. DR Congo President Félix Tshisekedi has accused Rwanda of violating the ceasefire. The peace deal was signed just a few days ago in Washington. President Trump hailed it as a miracle. He claimed the DRC conflict is among the 8 wars he has ended and reiterated his desire to win a Nobel Peace Prize. But the DRC president's recent accusations have cast doubts over the peace deal.
Despite our good faith and the recently ratified agreement, it is clear that Rwanda is already violating its commitments. The day after the signing, units of the Rwandan Defence Forces conducted and supported heavy weapons attacks.
The DRC president referred to attacks by Rwandan forces in several locations across South Kivu province in recent days. DRC and neighbouring Burundi slammed Rwanda after the M-23 made a rapid advance to threaten the city of Uvira near the border with Burundi. The Burundian Foreign Ministry took to X to condemn the bombing on Burundian territory. According to Burundian military sources, at least 20 Burundian soldiers have been killed since last Monday on Congolese soil. Reportedly, hundreds of fleeing Congolese and allied Burundian soldiers have sought refuge inside of Burundi. Violence in eastern DR Congo fled earlier this year, when Rwanda-backed M-23 rebels seized the key eastern city of Goma in January, and Bukavu, which is the capital of South Kivu province. The region has been plagued by 3 decades of conflict. The latest deal, brokered by President Donald Trump, had offered some hope that peace could finally be within reach for the region. As part of the deal, the US will also secure supplies of critical minerals present in the region. However, DR Congo has denied putting its resources under foreign control.
Permettez-moi d'être parfaitement clair.
Let me be perfectly clear, these agreements do not enshrine any form of sharing of our sovereignty. They do not validate anyone's territorial claims, nor do they validate the placing of our resources under external control.
Fighting in the mineral-rich eastern DR Congo has been raging for 30 years. Several ceasefire agreements have been brokered and broken in the past, and none of them could put an end to the fighting and bloodshed. Can the Trump-brokered peace deal deliver on its promise, or will it also meet the same fate as the past peace efforts? Well, for more on this, we have with us Stella Agara, a governance and security analyst joining us live from Nairobi in Kenya. Welcome to Firstpost.
Thank you for having me.
Stella, what does this latest flashpoint of fighting mean for the latest peace deal, of course, framed by Donald Trump as a miracle?
I mean, one of the things I've actually said in this studio before about this deal was that President Trump should not celebrate immediately. And there is a part of the reasons why I had said he should not celebrate immediately is because as a country, they were introducing new interests into a conflict that already has very many interests. His outright announcement and declaration that he was coming in to get benefits for the US, and he specifically said his rich friends are going to benefit, has made it extremely tricky for proper peace to be reached in the region, because there are people who are already enjoying the stakes of the minerals in the country. And right now, as you hear the President Tshisekedi saying that he's not even in full agreement that they have put the minerals of his country under the protection and cover of a foreign country, and they've not given them up. As long as the peace deal has these kinds of disagreements within it, it poses challenges in terms of whether or not it's going to be respected. The other thing is that not all the interests in this conflict were in the room when the peace deal was being reached. I have a number of countries, for example, that I can mention that had quite a stake in the conflict. If you notice that there was a military camp by the South Africans in DRC before Rwanda attacked. And SADC had also a mission in DRC before Rwanda attacked. So all people who should have been keen in the conversation, the East Africa community itself, there are presidents in the East Africa region who have stakes, not just in the safety of DRC, but some of whom have decided to have personal interests in the mining sector and the benefits from DRC, including the President of Kenya and the President of Uganda. Not having those in the room, and of course the interests from Europe that have been benefiting from the minerals, and having the government of President Trump claiming to have brokered peace, puts us in a very difficult position. You may also note that governments like the government of China will not just sit down and watch this kind of a peace agreement work when it's going to eventually benefit the interests of the US accessing the minerals. So it's a very complicated situation, and I'm worried that this puts the agreement in a very shaky place, and it puts the people of DRC Congo, who desperately desire peace, in a very delicate position.
Yes, and Stella, we're going to come on to the people living in eastern DRC, but first I want to look at the international efforts to end this conflict. We know, of course, for whatever reason, whatever moral reason, Donald Trump is trying to end this conflict, this long-running conflict, but do you think more is needed from within Africa and potentially internationally?
Finally, I absolutely believe that more is needed from Africa. I have been on record again in this video as having communicated that there are fundamental problems with a conflict like this being addressed from outside the continent. I have definitely spoken here and said that the AU has really let the continent down to allow the negotiations to be addressed from outside. And part of the shortcomings of this peace agreement are as a result of the fact that the agreement is being done from outside the continent. I must also point out that my contention that the US, Qatar, and etc. may not necessarily be the best interlocutors in these negotiations is because when any other interests come in, they actually get in the way of not just get in the way, but they're introducing new interests that complicate the conflict even more. When you're trying to have a peace negotiation, one of the things that you must always make sure is that the interlocutors are people who have a standing and moral authority to actually speak in the conflict. Can Africa play a bigger role in these conversations? Yes, they can. I think the President of Kenya, who is the chair of the East Africa community at this moment, who should have been the
Well, thank you to Stella for providing that insight. This is a situation we will continue to monitor on Firstpost Africa. Next, we shift to South Africa, where President Cyril Ramaphosa is warning that white supremacy is threatening the nation's unity. This amid worsening relations with the United States over claims of a white genocide and a bubbling G20 controversy. President Ramaphosa was speaking at a conference of the co-ruling African National Congress Party, the party of Nelson Mandela that defeated white minority rule in South Africa 3 decades ago.
Some in our society still adhere to notions of racial superiority and seek to maintain racial privilege. The vehement opposition by some groups to our policies of transformation and redress conveniently align with wider and white victimhood fed by false claims of the persecution of white Afrikaners in our country.
While not specifically naming the United States or Donald Trump, these comments from Ramaphosa come in the wake of an unsubstantiated claim by the US president of a genocide and land seizures against white Afrikaners. The claims were first made in the Oval Office when Ramaphosa was in the White House for bilateral talks. And on Monday, Ramaphosa urged global pushback against this rhetoric.
The propaganda of these false claims has real implications for our sovereignty, international relations, and national security. It is essential that we counter this narrative and defeat this agenda through direct and frank engagement, mobilizing broad support for the South African vision of non-racialism, reconciliation, and transformation.
After what some have described as Trump's White House ambush on Ramaphosa, relations have become further strained, culminating in the US boycott of Africa's first ever G20 summit in Johannesburg. And after Ramaphosa refused to hand the presidency over to a more junior American official, Trump said South Africa would not be invited to next year's summit.
At the conclusion of the G20, South Africa refused to hand off the G20 presidency to a senior representative from our U.S. Embassy, who attended the closing ceremony. Therefore, at my direction, South Africa will not be receiving an invitation to the 2026 G20, which will be hosted in the great city of Miami, Florida next year.
South Africa have received support both publicly and privately from G20 member nations, according to Pretoria. But the South African administration has acknowledged the situation may require patience.
About this time next year, the UK will be taking over the G20 presidency. We will be able to engage meaningfully and substantively over what really matters to the rest of the world. For now, we will take a commercial break until we resume normal programming.
Other points of friction between the two countries include a 30% tariff on South African goods. Pretoria's attempts to reduce this levy, the highest in sub-Saharan Africa, have been denied. The US Senate is also proposing South Africa's removal from AGOA, a key trade agreement that removes duties on almost 2,000 goods. As of yet, there has been no response from the Trump administration to Ramaphosa's latest comments. But with the South African president calling for a global pushback against the US president's rhetoric, this intense bilateral feud could be set for another flashpoint. Our next story sheds a light on a rare moment of relief in Nigeria's security crisis. 100 children kidnapped from a Catholic boarding school last month are now back and safe with their loved ones. The freed students arrived on Monday at a Niger state government facility in Minna. Most are between 10 and 17 years old. Escorted by military vehicles, the convoy was meant to show control, but it also reminded everyone of the danger these children had just escaped. Some were exhausted, others in shock. Many still wore the clothes from the day of their abduction. Officials welcomed them with hugs and handshakes. The governor of Niger State has also promised medical care and support for the children who were abducted.
We're only excited that we have gotten part of the children. It's not a time for us to be talking about other issues. Our excitement is that we have these children, 100 of them, and by the grace of God, we're expecting the remaining half to be released very soon, by the grace of God.
UNICEF has also set up a facility to provide immediate medical care. Dozens of trained staff are ready to offer ongoing psychological and mental health support.
We've already trained about 44 people. So we are hoping that eventually when they're released from the health facility, they will fall into hands that are capable, already equipped with knowledge and skills on psychosocial and mental health, and it will help in managing the children more effectively.
But these 100 children released are only part of the story. In November, 303 students and 12 staff were kidnapped from St Mary's Catholic School. 50 escaped immediately. More than 150 remain in captivity. Exact numbers remain uncertain, as some families live in remote villages with no phone service, delaying registration of missing cases. Locals blamed armed bandits and gangs that target schools and travellers across northern Nigeria for ransom. And this kidnapping follows a string of recent attacks. On November 17th, at least 25 school children were kidnapped in Kebbi State. 38 churchgoers were also abducted in Kwara State on November 18th. Then, on November the 29th, a pastor, a bride and a toddler were among 26 people kidnapped in 2 separate incidents. Many of those abducted have since been released, but the frequency is alarming. Nigerian President Bola Tinubu celebrated the 100 children freed, but he says the battle is only half won. His directive is clear: no child left behind.
My directive to our security forces remains that all the students and other abducted Nigerians across the country must be rescued and brought back home safely. We must account for all the victims. Our children should no longer be sitting ducks for heartless terrorists intent on disrupting their education and subjecting them and their parents to unspeakable trauma.
And Tinubu has declared a national security emergency, recruiting thousands of additional police and soldiers. Nigeria has faced this cycle of kidnapping for more than a decade. In 2014, 276 schoolgirls were kidnapped by Boko Haram in Chibok. In 2018, 110 schoolgirls were again abducted by Boko Haram in Dapchi. And now, the same seems to be repeating in Kwara, Kebbi and Niger State. Amnesty International reports nearly 20,500 schools have closed across 7 states in the past month, following the St Mary's kidnapping, as parents fear sending children to class. For now, hundreds of parents still cling to hope for the safe return of their missing children. Church leaders are praying for the missing. 100 children are home tonight, safe with their families. But it's a momentary celebration for a country that has been plagued with kidnappings for years. We'll keep tracking the developments and bring you all of the latest updates. We end the show tonight with a heartbreaking story from South Africa's shoreline. More than 60,000 African penguins have vanished in less than a decade. Mothers, fathers, chicks, all starved to death, silently at sea. Amid their trigger was simple. Their main food source, sardines, have been completely wiped out. Dasson Island and Robben Island were once home to thriving penguin colonies. But between 2004 and 2012, 95% of penguins on those 2 islands disappeared completely. Scientists say less than 20,000 are alive today. Researchers say these penguins starved during their molting period. It's a 21-day event when they shed old feathers and grow new ones. During those weeks, the penguins can't go to the sea, they must stay on land and rely on fat reserves to survive. But those reserves don't exist because their main food source is almost completely gone. Marine biologists say a warmer environment and saltier water made sardines reproduction nearly impossible. At the same time, commercial fishing continued, which further drained their food supply. And the result, thousands of penguins left with no food to eat. The loss on Dasson and Robben Island is part of a global decline. African penguins have dropped nearly 80% in 30 years. In 2024, the species was declared critically endangered, with fewer than 10,000 breeding pairs left. But this loss is not just about numbers. It's about the people on the ground trying to save what's left. Every week, rangers set out to catch injured or starving penguins by hand. They say it takes 2 minutes to catch one. Sometimes they are found hiding under cars after wandering into city streets. Once caught, they're sent to specialist hospitals for treatment, but vets say treatment alone can't help them thrive. Healthy oceans are paramount. Marine biologists say the biggest threat is still food. Starving penguins stop breeding, and when they can't breed, they head closer to extinction.
What can we do at a colony level to prepare for that? We undergo and we put in disease surveillance, and that is particularly around avian influenza, and what can we do to reduce the risk of that? And then we also need to manage predators as well. We also conduct a lot of science together with collaborators to better understand their movement, the threats at sea, the threats on land, and try and make recommendations for how we can safeguard the species and prevent it from becoming extinct.
One promising solution is bringing back artificial nests. Decades ago, penguins dug nests into guano, That is compacted waste of seabirds. But that guano was harvested for fertilizer, wiping out the natural shelter. So today, conservationists are building artificial nests to help them breed safely.
Essentially, historically, when the guano was harvested from the islands, that's what the penguins used to burrow into to make their nests. But it was harvested for fertilizer, and so that's been removed, and so the actual material for digging their nests was removed. And so artificial nests are incredibly important, and the recent science has shown that it does improve breeding success. So we need to keep on doing interventions like that.
But even with rescue teams, artificial nests and fishing restrictions around 6 major colonies, scientists say we need to do more. Some groups have taken the South African government to court, arguing the no fishing zones are too small to make a difference. Marine biologists say it clearly. Penguins and industrial fishing can't compete for the last few sardines. Conservation officers say it's getting harder to protect them from tourist disturbance. The critically endangered label has made penguins a global attraction. Loud crowds, selfie sticks, and the thrill to see a near-extinct species has reportedly added to the strain.
Seeing them, we're hearing that they're critically endangered, actually kind of breaks my heart. And I think with COVID-19 and all the things that have happened, we have lost so much already, and we continue to lose. And I think as people, we don't appreciate what we have until we have lost.
But marine biologists say this moment feels like a turning point. They say the growing attention to the dire issue can hopefully save them.
We really need to do everything we can, and securing their food source is one of the biggest things that we can do to try and stop that decline. And it is possible to recover the penguin. That's the thing. We can't lose hope. So we have to keep the hope.
These birds are more than a tourist attraction. They reflect the health of our ecosystem. Right now, every rescue counts, and every lost penguin is a reminder that time is running out for the world. That's it on the show for today. We will see you again tomorrow at the same time. Until then, thank you for watching.